My name is Melissa, and I'm 28 years old. I've always been my family's financial safety net, and honestly, I never minded helping out. For months, I'd been planning our annual family barbecue, a tradition that meant everything to me. But what happened this year changed everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. I found out the truth in the worst possible way, and it shattered my heart completely. Before I share what happened, please let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. Now, let me tell you how my world fell apart. The foundation of my relationship with my family had always been built on trust and mutual support. As a successful marketing coordinator at a mid-sized advertising firm in downtown Chicago, I'd worked my way up from an entry-level position after college. My salary wasn't extraordinary, but it was stable and allowed me to live comfortably in a modest apartment while still having enough left over to help my family when they needed it. And they needed it often. My parents, Robert and Patricia, lived in the same suburban house where I grew up, about 45 minutes outside the city. Dad worked as a maintenance supervisor at a local manufacturing plant, while Mom had recently started a part-time job at a retail store after years of being a stay-at-home parent. My younger sister Ashley, 25, was a freelance graphic designer who struggled with inconsistent income, and my brother Kevin, 23, was finishing his final year of college while working nights at a restaurant. The annual family barbecue wasn't just any ordinary gathering. It was a tradition started by my late grandmother, Dad's mother, who passed away when I was 15. She used to say that food brought families together like nothing else could, and every summer, she'd host elaborate backyard feasts with homemade everything. After she died, the tradition fell to my parents, but over the years, as finances got tighter and life got more complicated, I gradually took over the planning and much of the funding. I didn't mind. It felt like a way to honor Grandma's memory while keeping our family connected. This year, I'd been planning since March. I'd already put down deposits on the tent rental, ordered custom decorations, planned the menu, and even arranged for a local band to play Grandma's favorite songs. The guest list included not just immediate family but aunts, uncles, cousins, and longtime family friends. It was going to be the biggest and best barbecue yet, and I was genuinely excited about bringing everyone together. That Tuesday evening in early June, when my phone rang and Dad's name appeared on the screen, I answered cheerfully, expecting to discuss final details for the party that was just 4 days away. Instead, his voice sounded heavy and apologetic from the first word. "Melissa, honey, I need to talk to you about something important," he said, and immediately my stomach dropped. Dad only used that tone when something was seriously wrong. "What's going on, Dad? Is everyone okay?" I asked, setting down the barbecue planning notebook I'd been reviewing. "Everyone's fine, sweetheart, but we need to cancel the barbecue this weekend. I know how much work you've put into it, and I feel terrible about this, but we just can't make it happen this year." His voice cracked slightly, and I could hear genuine distress. The words hit me like a physical blow. "Cancel? Dad, what happened?" "We've been planning this for months." He sighed deeply before explaining. "Your mother lost her part-time job last week. The store is downsizing, and they let go of all the newest employees. Ashley's car broke down, and the repair bill is going to be over $1,000. She can't work without transportation. And Kevin's student loan payment increased because he's in his final semester, and the restaurant cut his hours." I listened, my heart sinking with each detail. These weren't frivolous problems. They were real financial emergencies that my family was facing all at once. "I know you've probably already spent money on preparations," Dad continued, "and I promise we'll pay you back as soon as we can. But right now, we can't afford gas money for people to drive out here, let alone contribute to food and supplies. It wouldn't be right to ask you to cover everything when you've already done so much." My immediate instinct was to solve the problem. "Dad, don't worry about the money. I can handle the expenses." I've been saving specifically for this, and I don't mind covering everything. This tradition is too important to skip. No, Melissa, he said firmly, more firmly than I'd expected. We can't keep letting you carry the financial burden for the whole family. It's not fair to you, and it's not sustainable. We need to skip this year and get back on our feet first. I tried to argue, offering to scale back the plans, suggesting we make it potluck style, proposing dozens of alternatives. But Dad remained adamant. The barbecue was off, and that was final. He thanked me for understanding, promised this was just temporary, and said we'd make it up next year. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the planning notebook filled with 3 months of preparation. I'd already purchased decorations, had groceries ordered for pickup, and confirmed RSVPs from 32 people. Part of me felt proud that my family trusted me enough to be honest about their financial struggles, and another part felt disappointed that something I'd looked forward to for months was suddenly gone. I spent the rest of the evening calling vendors to cancel orders where possible, though I'd lose the deposits. The florist was understanding. The band was able to book another gig, but the tent rental company would only refund 50%. I decided I'd still have a small personal barbecue in my apartment building's courtyard, maybe grill a burger and remember Grandma in my own way. The next morning, I woke up with a strange mix of disappointment and determination. Even though the family gathering was canceled, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to do something to honor our tradition. After calling in sick to work, claiming I needed a mental health day, I decided to go grocery shopping for a scaled-down version of the barbecue menu. Walking through the supermarket aisles alone felt surreal. I'd planned to buy food for over 30 people, and now I was selecting single portions of everything. The meat department, where I usually ordered bulk quantities of ribs, chicken, and hamburger patties, felt cavernous as I picked up a package containing just 2 burger patties and a few chicken thighs. The produce section, where I typically filled multiple carts with corn, tomatoes, and salad ingredients, seemed almost mocking as I selected a single ear of corn and 1 tomato. Other shoppers around me were clearly preparing for their own gatherings. I watched a woman with 3 young children loading her cart with party supplies and bulk snacks, heard a couple debating whether 12 pounds of ribs would be enough for their cookout, and observed an elderly man carefully selecting ingredients for what was obviously a family recipe. Each interaction reminded me of what I was missing, but I tried to focus on the positive aspects of having a quiet, reflective celebration. The checkout process was particularly depressing. Instead of needing multiple carts and expecting a grocery bill in the hundreds, I stood in the express lane with a small basket containing maybe $20 worth of food. The cashier, a cheerful teenager, made small talk about the beautiful weather being perfect for barbecues, and I forced a smile while agreeing that it would indeed be a lovely day for outdoor cooking. Back at my apartment, I began the familiar but miniaturized process of barbecue preparation. I arranged my few decorations in the building's small courtyard area, hanging string lights that were meant for a much larger space. The effect was more pathetic than festive, but I convinced myself it was cozy rather than sad. I prepared a small batch of Grandma's famous marinade, the recipe I'd memorized by heart, though mixing it for just a few pieces of chicken felt almost insulting to her memory. My phone buzzed occasionally with messages from the family group chat. Ashley posted a photo of her car at the repair shop with a caption about unexpected expenses. Kevin shared a screenshot of his increased student loan payment with multiple crying emojis. Mom sent a message to the group saying she was spending the day applying for new jobs online. Dad remained quiet, which was unusual for him in the family chat. I responded supportively to each message, offering encouragement and reminding them that next year's barbecue would be even better. But as the day progressed, I noticed something odd about their responses. Usually, our family group chat was lively and conversational, with multiple people responding to each message and conversations flowing naturally. Today, everyone seemed to respond directly to my messages, but avoided engaging with each other. Looking back through my phone's photo gallery, I found pictures from previous barbecues that made my chest tight with nostalgia. There was Grandma in her floral apron, teaching 8-year-old me how to flip burgers without burning them. A photo of Dad and Uncle Mike having their annual corn eating contest while everyone cheered. Ashley and Kevin as teenagers, complaining about family photos, but secretly loving the attention. Mom and her sister laughing so hard at some forgotten joke that tears streamed down their faces. These weren't just gatherings. They were the moments that defined our family identity. The barbecue was where we celebrated graduations, announced pregnancies, worked through disagreements, and created the stories we'd tell for years afterward. Skipping it felt like skipping Christmas or Thanksgiving. It felt wrong on a fundamental level. As evening approached, I noticed some strange activity on social media that made me increasingly uncomfortable. Ashley posted an Instagram story showing her at a grocery store, but instead of picking up necessities like I expected, her cart seemed to contain party supplies. The image was brief and partially obscured, but I could swear I saw paper plates, plastic cups, and what looked like charcoal. Kevin's Snapchat showed him at a liquor store, laughing with friends and carrying a case of beer. When I checked the location tag, it showed he was near my parents' house, not his college campus. I tried to push down the growing unease. Maybe Ashley was helping a friend with their party preparations. Maybe Kevin was visiting home and picking up drinks for Dad. There were perfectly reasonable explanations for everything I was seeing. But my intuition, the same instinct that had helped me succeed in marketing by reading between the lines and noticing inconsistencies, was screaming that something wasn't right. I spent that evening in the courtyard, grilling my small meal and eating alone while neighbors' barbecues filled the air with laughter and music. The string lights I'd hung looked ridiculous in the small space, and the single-place setting at the tiny table felt like a monument to loneliness. I tried calling Grandma's memory into the moment, imagining what she would say about adaptability and making the best of difficult situations, but even her imagined wisdom couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something important. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of perfect weather that made you believe in divine intervention. The sky was clear blue without a single cloud, the temperature sat at a comfortable 72 degrees, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers from the building's landscaping. It was exactly the kind of day Grandma used to call barbecue blessed, and the irony wasn't lost on me that this perfect weather was going to be wasted on my solitary celebration. I woke up early, as I always did on barbecue day, driven by years of habit and the muscle memory of preparation. Usually, this would be the day I'd arrive at my parents' house before 7 in the morning to start the slow cooking process for ribs and prep all the side dishes. Instead, I found myself wandering around my apartment, unsure how to fill the time before my abbreviated afternoon cookout. I'd set up my small grill on the courtyard the night before, along with a folding table and chair that looked absurdly formal for a party of one. The decorations I'd hung seemed to mock me in the morning light, too elaborate for the tiny space and too sparse for the emotional weight I'd placed on them. But I was committed to following through, if only to prove to myself that I could maintain our family traditions even in isolation. Around noon, I began the cooking process. Lighting the small charcoal grill felt ceremonial but hollow. Usually, this moment would be accompanied by Dad's commentary about proper fire management and Kevin's impatient questions about when the food would be ready. Today, the only sounds were distant lawn mowers and the occasional car passing by on the street. I grilled 2 hamburger patties for chicken thighs and 1 ear of corn. The smell was exactly right, triggering powerful memories of past barbecues, but the portions looked ridiculous on the large grill grate. I'd prepared Grandma's potato salad recipe, though scaling it down to serve one person had required some creative mathematics with the measurements. The result tasted right but felt wrong, like singing a duet alone. While the meat cooked, I tried to recreate other barbecue traditions. I played the same playlist I'd compiled for the family gathering, featuring Grandma's favorite songs, mixed with more contemporary tracks that Ashley and Kevin enjoyed. But music that was designed to fill a backyard full of people felt overwhelming in the small courtyard. I lowered the volume until it was barely audible, then turned it off completely. I'd brought down photo albums from previous barbecues, thinking I could flip through them while eating and feel connected to past celebrations. Instead, looking at images of family members laughing and embracing just made the empty chair across from me feel more prominent. Every photo reminded me of what I was missing, rather than what I was honoring. The eating process was the most depressing part. I'd set the table with real plates and cloth napkins, trying to maintain some dignity in the experience. But sitting alone with a full place setting felt more like dining with a ghost than having a celebration. I found myself listening for familiar voices, expecting Dad to comment on the chicken's seasoning or Mom to fuss about everyone eating enough vegetables. My phone remained frustratingly quiet throughout the afternoon. Usually, barbecue day involved constant communication with family members about timing, who was bringing what, and updates on travel plans. Today, the family group chat showed no activity at all. I'd posted a photo of my small setup with a caption about keeping the tradition alive, but the response was minimal, just a few heart emojis from Ashley and a looks good from Kevin. No questions about how I was doing, no expressions of regret about missing the gathering, no suggestions for making it up later. As the afternoon progressed, I became increasingly aware of other people's barbecues happening around me. The apartment complex was full of the sounds of celebration, children playing, adults laughing, music from multiple directions, and the constant sizzle of various grills. Through the fence, I could see my neighbor's backyard filled with extended family, exactly the kind of gathering I'd planned for my own family. The contrast was painful and impossible to ignore. I tried to maintain a positive attitude by focusing on practical benefits. No stress about coordinating schedules, no worry about having enough food, no pressure to be the perfect hostess. But these advantages felt hollow compared to the absence of connection and shared joy that made barbecues meaningful in the first place. The most unsettling part of the day was the social media silence from my family. Usually, Ashley was constantly posting photos of our gatherings, tagging everyone and creating digital memories we'd look back on for months. Kevin typically shared stories about family traditions and tagged friends to make them jealous of our food. Mom and Dad weren't heavy social media users, but they usually appeared in other people's posts throughout the day. Today, it was as if my entire family had disappeared from the internet. I checked their location settings on various apps, a habit I developed over the years of coordinating family logistics. Ashley's location showed she was at home, which made sense given her car troubles. Kevin's location was turned off entirely, which was unusual but not unprecedented. Mom and Dad didn't share locations regularly, so their absence from the digital world wasn't necessarily suspicious. But something felt wrong. My family wasn't the type to completely disconnect, especially on a day when they knew I was struggling with the canceled plans. Usually, they'd be checking on me, sharing photos of their alternative activities, or at least maintaining more communication. The silence felt deliberate rather than coincidental. As evening approached and I cleaned up my modest celebration, I found myself questioning whether I'd made the right choice in accepting the cancellation so easily. Part of me wondered if I should have insisted more strongly on helping with the financial aspects, or if there were creative solutions we hadn't explored. But Dad had been so firm about not wanting to burden me further, and I'd respected that boundary even though it meant sacrificing something that meant so much to me. The day ended with me sitting alone in the courtyard as the sun set, surrounded by the fading decorations and empty plates. Other family celebrations continued around me, their laughter and music serving as a soundtrack to my isolation. I felt proud of myself for maintaining the tradition in my own way, but also deeply sad about what felt like the beginning of the end of something precious. As darkness settled over the apartment complex and the sounds of neighboring barbecues began to fade, I found myself in my kitchen washing the few dishes from my solitary celebration. The process felt anticlimactic after such an emotionally charged day. Usually, post-barbecue cleanup was a group effort filled with continued conversation and the satisfying exhaustion that comes from a day well spent with loved ones. Tonight, I finished washing everything in less than 10 minutes and was left standing in my kitchen with nothing but silence and the lingering smell of charcoal on my clothes. I was putting away the last plate when my phone buzzed with a notification that would change everything. At first glance, it seemed routine. Ashley had started an Instagram live session. My sister occasionally did live streams about her graphic design work or random thoughts, so I almost ignored it. But something compelled me to click on the notification, maybe the hope of seeing a familiar face after such an isolating day. The video loaded, and for a moment, I couldn't process what I was seeing. The image was slightly shaky as Ashley moved around with her phone, but the background was unmistakably familiar. It was a backyard, but not just any backyard. It was my parents' backyard, the same space where every family barbecue had taken place for the past decade. But this wasn't the quiet, financially strapped household I'd imagined based on our phone conversation just days before. The yard was completely transformed. Professional-grade string lights created a warm canopy overhead, far more elaborate than anything we'd ever had at previous barbecues. A large white tent dominated the lawn, the kind that required professional installation and cost several $100s to rent. Underneath it, I could see multiple tables covered with crisp white linens and centerpieces that looked professionally arranged. But it was the people that made my blood run cold. This wasn't a small, intimate gathering of immediate family trying to make the best of a difficult situation. The yard was filled with at least 30 people, all dressed nicely and clearly enjoying themselves. I recognized faces from our usual barbecue guest list: aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends, and neighbors who had been coming to our gatherings for years. Ashley's camera panned across the scene as she narrated her live stream with obvious excitement. "Just having the most amazing time at our annual family barbecue," she said, her voice bright and cheerful. "Mom and Dad really outdid themselves this year." The camera captured details that made my stomach drop further with each passing second. There was Kevin manning an elaborate outdoor cooking station that looked like something from a professional catering company. Multiple grills were going simultaneously, tended by people in matching aprons that I'd never seen before. The food spread visible on the tables included shrimp cocktail, prime rib, specialty salads, and desserts that were clearly from an upscale bakery rather than homemade. A professional DJ booth was set up near the house, complete with speakers and lighting equipment that would have cost more to rent than I spent on groceries in a month. The music was exactly the kind of high-energy party soundtrack that would require expensive equipment to sound that clear and powerful. This wasn't someone's personal playlist coming through a Bluetooth speaker. This was a professionally managed sound system. As Ashley continued streaming, moving through the crowd and chatting with guests, I recognized my father in the background. He was wearing a brand new barbecue apron with Grill Master Robert embroidered across the front, laughing loudly with Uncle Mike and holding what appeared to be an expensive craft beer. This was not the stressed, financially strapped man who had called me in distress just 4 days earlier. Mom appeared in the frame next, directing what looked like catering staff as they refreshed food stations and collected empty plates. She was wearing a new dress I'd never seen before and jewelry that sparkled under the professional lighting. Her hair was styled in a way that indicated she'd been to a salon recently, and her makeup was more elaborate than I'd seen her wear even to formal events. The comments section of Ashley's live stream was filling up with responses from people I recognized. Family friends were thanking my parents for another incredible annual party and praising the food and entertainment. Cousins who lived out of state were commenting about how glad they were that they'd made the trip this year, and how the party was worth every mile of the drive. But what broke my heart most completely was reading comments that referenced the tradition itself. People were talking about how this was the best barbecue yet and praising my parents for keeping the family tradition alive and never missing a year. Someone even commented about how impressive it was that Mom and Dad had pulled this together despite everything going on. Ashley responded to comments as she streamed, thanking people for coming and agreeing that it was definitely our best party ever. When someone asked about the professional setup, she laughed and said something about how Dad had really gone all out this year and wanted to make it extra special. I sat frozen in my kitchen, phone shaking in my hands, as the truth crashed over me in waves. This wasn't a last-minute gathering that had come together organically. The level of professional coordination, the elaborate decorations, the catering, the DJ, and the guest attendance all pointed to weeks or months of planning. This was exactly the barbecue I had been organizing, just without me. The realization that every family member had lied to me directly was devastating enough. But seeing evidence that they had deliberately excluded me from an event that I had not only planned to fund, but had been planning for months, made the betrayal feel intentional and cruel. This wasn't about money or financial hardship. This was about something much deeper and more painful. As Ashley's live stream continued, showing fireworks being set up in the background, I began taking screenshots of everything. The evidence of the elaborate party, the professional setup, the guest list, and the comments all painted a picture that completely contradicted everything I'd been told. I needed to document what I was seeing, partly for my own sanity and partly because I suspected this was only the beginning of a much larger deception. The stream ended after about 15 minutes, but the damage was complete. I sat in my dark kitchen, staring at the screenshots on my phone, feeling like everything I thought I knew about my family and my place in it had been a lie. The lonely barbecue I'd had that afternoon, which had felt like a meaningful way to honor tradition despite difficult circumstances, now felt like the pathetic consolation prize it actually was. The hours following Ashley's live stream passed in a blur of disbelief, anger, and heartbreak that I'd never experienced before. I found myself unable to move from my kitchen table, staring at the screenshots I'd taken as if looking at them long enough might reveal some alternative explanation for what I'd witnessed. But no matter how many times I reviewed the images, the conclusion remained the same. My family had deliberately and systematically deceived me. The physical symptoms of shock set in first. My hands trembled uncontrollably as I held my phone, and I felt simultaneously hot and cold, as if my body couldn't regulate its temperature. My stomach churned with nausea, and I realized I hadn't eaten anything since my solitary barbecue hours earlier, though the thought of food made me feel worse. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes from the live stream. Dad's new apron, Mom directing catering staff, Kevin laughing with extended family who had supposedly been too financially strapped to attend. I began replaying Dad's phone call from Tuesday night, analyzing every word and tone with the clarity that comes from knowing you've been manipulated. His voice had carried such convincing distress when he talked about Mom losing her job, Ashley's car repairs, and Kevin's increased student loans. He'd sounded genuinely apologetic about canceling the barbecue, even emotional when he talked about disappointing me after all my planning. But now I realized that every detail had been carefully crafted to create maximum sympathy while providing justifiable reasons for exclusion. Mom's job loss explained why they couldn't contribute financially. Ashley's car troubles justified her absence from planning activities. Kevin's student loan issues provided cover for why he couldn't help with expenses. Together, these stories created a narrative that made me feel guilty for even offering to pay for everything, exactly as Dad had intended. The level of coordination required for the deception became more apparent as I thought through the logistics. Someone had to secure the tent rental, hire the catering staff, book the DJ, arrange for professional lighting, and coordinate with all the guests. These weren't last-minute decisions made after our phone call. They were arrangements that would have been finalized weeks or months in advance, potentially while I was still actively planning the original barbecue. I spent the next several hours going through my family's social media accounts like a detective, looking for clues I'd missed. Ashley's Instagram stories from the past week, which I'd only glanced at previously, now took on new meaning. Photos I'd interpreted as random daily activities could now be seen as party preparation. A picture of her at a party supply store that I'd assumed was for a client project. A video of her testing sound equipment that I'd thought was for her graphic design work. An image of her with Mom at what I'd assumed was a casual shopping trip, but now I could see catering menus in the background. Kevin's social media revealed similar hidden activity. His Snapchat location history, which I could access because we'd connected our accounts for family safety years earlier, showed multiple visits to party rental companies and specialty food stores over the past 2 weeks. A post about helping with family projects that I'd assumed meant household chores now seemed obviously related to party planning. Even Mom, who barely used social media, had subtle indicators of preparation. Her Facebook account showed she'd been added to event planning groups and had received messages from catering companies. She'd liked posts from several local businesses that specialized in party equipment and entertainment services. The financial implications hit me next, and they were staggering. Based on what I'd seen in the live stream, the total cost of the party easily exceeded $3,000. The tent rental alone would have been at least $500. Professional catering for 30-plus people would have cost well over $1,000. The DJ, lighting, flowers, premium alcohol, and specialty foods would have added hundreds more. Even if they'd gotten deals or called in favors, this was an expensive production. I grabbed a calculator and began working through the numbers, feeling sicker with each calculation. Over the past 6 months, my family had asked for and received financial help from me totaling nearly $4,000. Dad had needed $800 for car repairs in January. Mom had asked for $600 to cover medical bills in March. Ashley had received $700 for various emergencies, including rent and utilities. Kevin had gotten help with textbooks and living expenses, totaling nearly $2,000. At the time, each request had seemed reasonable and urgent. Dad's car repair was necessary for him to get to work. Mom's medical bills were from genuine health issues that insurance hadn't covered completely. Ashley's graphic design business had legitimate slow periods that affected her income. Kevin's college expenses were real and substantial. But now I had to consider the possibility that some or all of these requests had been orchestrated to fund a party that I was specifically excluded from. The timing was particularly suspicious when I laid it out chronologically. The requests had increased in frequency starting in March, exactly when I would have been discussing barbecue plans with the family. The most recent request, Kevin's need for textbook money, had come just 2 weeks before Dad's call about canceling the barbecue. Sleep was impossible that night. Every time I tried to close my eyes, my mind raced with questions and implications. Why had they decided to exclude me? Was it something I'd done or said? Had I been too controlling about previous barbecues? Was there some family dynamic I'd missed or misunderstood? Or was this simply about money, with my family seeing me as a convenient funding source rather than an integral part of the celebration? The emotional pain was unlike anything I'd experienced, even including the grief of losing Grandma. This felt like a death of a different kind, the death of trust, of family identity, and of the naive belief that the people who loved you most would never deliberately hurt you. I'd always known my family had flaws and complications, but I'd never imagined they were capable of such calculated deception. By sunrise, I was exhausted but more clear-headed about what had happened. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a series of unfortunate coincidences. This was a deliberate exclusion backed by months of planning and funded by money they'd obtained from me under false pretenses. The barbecue hadn't been canceled due to financial hardship. It had been reorganized without me, possibly because my presence would have complicated their ability to enjoy the fruits of their deception. The question now was what to do with this knowledge. Part of me wanted to confront them immediately, to demand explanations and apologies. But another part of me suspected that this revelation was only the beginning, and that waiting to see how they'd handle the aftermath might reveal even more about their true intentions toward me. As it turned out, I wouldn't have to wait long for the next chapter of their betrayal to unfold. Sunday morning arrived gray and drizzly, as if the weather had shifted to match my emotional state. I'd finally fallen asleep around 4 in the morning, only to wake up 3 hours later feeling more exhausted than when I'd gone to bed. My first instinct was to check my phone for any messages from family members, perhaps acknowledgments of the party or explanations for what I'd witnessed. Instead, I found only silence in the group chat and no individual messages from anyone. I made coffee with shaking hands and tried to decide on my next steps. Part of me wanted to confront them immediately about the live stream, but I also felt curious about whether any of them would voluntarily mention the party or offer any explanation for the deception. I decided to wait and see if anyone would break the silence first. I didn't have to wait long. At exactly 9:37 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text message from Dad that made my blood pressure spike instantly. Morning, sweetheart. Hope you had a nice, quiet weekend. I hate to bother you on Sunday, but we've got some urgent bills that came up unexpectedly. Could you help us out with $2,800? Mom's got some medical expenses that insurance won't cover, and the mortgage payment is due tomorrow. I know it's a lot to ask, but you know we wouldn't reach out unless it was really important. Love you. I stared at the message in complete disbelief. Less than 12 hours after I'd watched evidence of them spending thousands of dollars on an elaborate party, Dad was asking me for nearly $3,000 for supposed emergencies. The audacity was breathtaking, but what made it even more insulting was the emotional manipulation embedded in the message. The casual "hope you had a nice quiet weekend" felt like mockery, given that he knew exactly how I'd spent my weekend after they'd excluded me from the family gathering. The "you know we wouldn't reach out unless it was really important" was particularly galling, considering how many times they'd reached out for money over the past months, apparently to fund their secret party planning. I took screenshots of Dad's message, adding them to the collection of evidence I'd gathered from Ashley's live stream. Then I sat back in my kitchen chair and let the anger build. This wasn't just about the money, though the financial manipulation was serious enough. This was about respect, honesty, and the fundamental dynamics of our family relationships. They had positioned me as the family bank account while excluding me from the family celebration, and now they expected me to continue funding their lifestyle without question. But before responding to Dad, I decided to do some research. I logged into the social media accounts of people who had attended the party, looking for additional evidence and getting a fuller picture of the event's scope. What I found was even more damaging than I'd expected. Family friends had posted dozens of photos and videos from the barbecue, tagging my parents and siblings throughout. The images showed elaborate food stations, professional decorations, and a guest list that included people who lived several states away. In the comments, people were praising my parents for their generosity and amazing hospitality. Several posts specifically mentioned that this was the best barbecue yet and praised Dad for really going all out this year. Uncle Mike had posted a video of Dad giving a toast to the assembled guests, thanking everyone for coming to their annual family tradition and talking about how important it was to keep the family together through good times and bad. The irony of this statement, given that they deliberately excluded me, was so thick it was almost comical. Most infuriatingly, I found posts from earlier in the day showing family members preparing for the party. Ashley had posted Instagram stories of herself setting up decorations and arranging flowers. Kevin had shared photos of himself helping with food preparation alongside what were clearly professional caterers. Mom had posted a rare Facebook update showing her getting ready for a special family day with photos of her at a hair salon. All of this social media activity had happened while they maintained complete silence in our family group chat, and while I spent my day alone, thinking they were struggling financially and feeling guilty about the canceled barbecue. The level of deception was staggering, But what made it worse was the realization that dozens of extended family members and friends were complicit in excluding me from an event that had supposedly been canceled for financial reasons. Armed with this evidence, I crafted my response to Dad's money request. I wanted to be strategic rather than purely emotional, giving them a chance to explain themselves while making it clear that I knew exactly what had happened. "Hi, Dad," I wrote. "I saw Ashley's Instagram live last night from what looked like an amazing barbecue party in your backyard. The professional setup looked incredible, and it seemed like everyone had a wonderful time. I'm confused, though, because I thought the barbecue was canceled due to financial constraints. Could you help me understand how we went from not being able to afford the barbecue on Tuesday to having what appeared to be a very expensive party on Saturday? I'm particularly confused about your request for $2,800 this morning, given the apparent costs of last night's event. I'd appreciate some clarification before we discuss any financial assistance." I sent the message and immediately began taking screenshots of everything I could find related to the party. I documented the guest list from various social media posts, calculated estimated costs based on visible services and supplies, and compiled a timeline of events that clearly showed the deception had been planned well in advance. Within minutes, my phone started buzzing with activity in the family group chat. Ashley posted a message claiming the live stream had shown a small gathering that had been thrown together last minute. Kevin jumped in to support her story, saying it had been just a few people who stopped by and that this setup wasn't as elaborate as it appeared on camera. Mom added that they'd used leftover decorations from previous years and that friends had brought most of the food. But their stories immediately contradicted each other and the evidence I'd gathered. Ashley's claim of a small gathering was absurd given the guest count visible in social media posts. Kevin's description of people stopping by didn't align with the professional catering and DJ services that were clearly documented. Mom's explanation about leftover decorations was laughable when compared to the sophisticated lighting and tent setup that required professional installation. Dad remained silent in the group chat, but sent me a private message attempting to maintain the original deception. I think Ashley's live stream made things look bigger than they were. We had a few neighbors over for burgers, nothing fancy. The money I'm asking for is completely separate from any social activities. These are real bills that need to be paid immediately. His response confirmed what I'd suspected. They had no intention of being honest with me, even when confronted with direct evidence of their deception. They were going to continue the lies and expect me to pretend I hadn't seen what I'd clearly witnessed. That's when I decided to take a more public approach. I posted a side-by-side comparison on my own social media accounts. Dad's text asking for $2,800 next to screenshots from Ashley's live stream showing the elaborate party. I included a caption that read, "Interesting how family financial emergencies work." Tuesday, "We're too broke for the barbecue, sorry." Saturday, "Professional catering, DJ, fireworks." Sunday, "Can you send $2,800 for bills?" I'm starting to think I've been funding more than I realized. I tagged all of my family members in the post, along with several family friends who had attended the party. Within an hour, the post had dozens of likes and comments from friends expressing shock and support. More importantly, family friends who had attended the barbecue began commenting with their own confusion about the conflicting stories they were seeing. The family group chat exploded with angry messages demanding I take down the post. Ashley accused me of airing family business publicly and embarrassing everyone. Kevin claimed I was overreacting and making a big deal out of nothing. Mom sent private messages saying I was hurting the family and that we should handle this privately. But it was Dad's response that confirmed I'd made the right decision. Instead of apologizing or attempting to explain, he sent a message that was pure manipulation. "I can't believe you'd humiliate your family like this over money. After everything we've done for you over the years, this is how you repay us? You're destroying our relationships with friends and extended family because you're jealous of a simple gathering. This is exactly why we didn't include you in the first place." That final sentence revealed the truth he'd been trying to hide. My exclusion had been deliberate from the beginning. This wasn't about financial hardship or protecting me from burden. This was about them wanting to enjoy the fruits of my financial support without having to include me in their celebration. I responded to his message with a simple statement. "You're right, Dad. This is exactly why you didn't include me. And this is exactly why I won't be including you in my financial support anymore." Then I blocked all of their numbers temporarily and took a long, hot shower to wash away the emotional residue of the most toxic 24 hours of my life. The immediate aftermath of going public with my family's deception was both liberating and overwhelming. Within hours of posting the evidence on social media, I received dozens of messages from friends, extended family members, and even strangers who had witnessed similar situations. The support was unexpected and healing, but it also opened my eyes to how common financial manipulation within families actually is. I wasn't alone in this experience, though that realization came with its own complicated emotions. The first step in protecting myself was practical. I changed all my banking passwords and removed the family members who had access to various accounts for emergency purposes. Over the years, I'd given Dad access to one of my savings accounts so he could deposit checks for me when I was traveling for work, and Mom had the login information for my credit card account because she'd helped me dispute some fraudulent charges. These conveniences, which had seemed like normal family arrangements, now felt like vulnerabilities that needed to be addressed immediately. I also called my bank to inform them about the situation and ask about protections against potential manipulation. The customer service representative, who had obviously handled similar calls before, walked me through additional security measures and helped me set up alerts for any unusual account activity. She also provided me with resources about financial abuse and suggested I document everything I could remember about past money requests and their stated purposes. The documentation process was more painful than I'd anticipated. Going through 6 months of text messages, bank transfers, and Venmo transactions revealed patterns I'd missed while I was living through them. The requests had indeed increased in frequency starting in March, and they often came with urgent timelines that discouraged careful consideration. "Need to pay this by tomorrow, and the deadline is today" were common phrases that had been used to pressure me into quick decisions. More disturbing was the realization that several of the emergencies had been fabricated entirely. Ashley's rent emergency in April had occurred during the same week she'd posted Instagram stories from an expensive weekend trip to Nashville. Kevin's textbook costs in May had been requested just before he'd posted photos of himself at expensive restaurants and entertainment venues. Even some of Mom and Dad's emergencies, when I researched them more carefully, didn't align with the medical bills and household expenses they'd claimed. The emotional processing was harder than the practical steps. I'd always defined myself partly through my role as the family helper, the one who could be counted on to solve problems and provide support when others couldn't. Having that identity stripped away left me feeling unmoored and questioning other relationships in my life. If my own family could manipulate me so completely, how could I trust my judgment about anyone else's intentions? I decided to seek professional help, something I'd considered before but never prioritized. The therapist I found specialized in family trauma and financial abuse, and she helped me understand that what I'd experienced wasn't uncommon. Families often develop dysfunctional patterns around money, especially when one member has significantly more resources than others. The key insight was that healthy relationships involve mutual respect and honesty, even when there are financial imbalances. Through therapy, I learned to recognize the manipulation tactics that had been used against me. The emotional appeals about family loyalty, the urgent timelines that prevented careful consideration, the guilt-inducing language about how much they hated to ask. These were all classic manipulation strategies designed to override my logical thinking and appeal to my emotions. Understanding the psychology behind these tactics helped me feel less foolish about having fallen for them. The healing process also involved rebuilding my social connections outside of my family. I'd spent so much energy managing family crises and financial requests that I'd neglected friendships and other relationships. Reconnecting with college friends, investing more deeply in workplace relationships, and exploring new social activities helped me remember who I was beyond my role as the family bank account. One of the most valuable connections I made was with a support group for people who had experienced financial abuse from family members. Hearing other people's stories helped me understand that family financial manipulation exists across all economic levels and family structures. The group provided practical advice about setting boundaries, rebuilding trust, and managing the ongoing relationships with family members who had been manipulative. 6 months after the barbecue incident, I felt strong enough to have limited contact with my family again. The conversations were awkward and surface level at first, but I maintained firm boundaries about financial discussions. I made it clear that I would no longer provide money for emergencies, planned expenses, or any other purposes, and that any attempts to manipulate me financially would result in immediate loss of contact. Some family relationships improved with these new boundaries, while others remained strained. Ashley eventually apologized for her role in the deception, though she continued to minimize its impact. Kevin maintained that the whole situation had been blown out of proportion, but he stopped making financial requests. Mom struggled with the new dynamic, but gradually learned to relate to me without expecting financial support. Dad remained defensive and resentful, and our relationship never fully recovered. The most important lesson I learned was that genuine love doesn't come with financial expectations. The people who truly cared about me were those who valued my presence rather than my ability to solve their problems with money. This realization led me to reevaluate all my relationships and invest more deeply in those that were based on mutual respect and genuine affection. I also learned to trust my instincts about manipulation and deception. The signs had been there throughout the barbecue situation, from the inconsistent social media activity to the coordinated family responses. In the future, I would pay attention to these red flags rather than dismissing them in favor of maintaining family harmony. 2 years later, I hosted my own barbecue celebration with friends and chosen family members who had supported me through the healing process. It was smaller than the elaborate family gatherings I'd organized in the past, but it was filled with genuine joy and appreciation. The tradition that had been corrupted by deception and manipulation was reclaimed as something pure and meaningful. The experience taught me that family relationships, like all relationships, must be based on honesty and mutual respect to be truly valuable. Blood relationships don't entitle people to special consideration if they're unwilling to treat you with basic human decency. And sometimes, the greatest act of love for yourself and others is to establish boundaries that protect everyone from destructive patterns. Have you ever experienced financial manipulation from family members, or found yourself questioning whether someone's financial emergencies were genuine? Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts or similar experiences. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about family dynamics, personal boundaries, and healing from toxic relationships. Share this video with anyone who might benefit from hearing that they're not alone in facing family financial manipulation. Remember that your worth isn't measured by your ability to solve other people's problems, and that true family supports your well-being rather than exploiting your generosity. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you recognize your own value and the importance of protecting your emotional and financial health. Take care of yourselves, and remember that you deserve relationships built on honesty and genuine love.
I never imagined my 32nd birthday would end with an eviction notice, but I guess life has a twisted sense of humor sometimes. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I had spent the entire morning decorating my small apartment with streamers and balloons, hoping this year would be different. The vanilla cake from my favorite bakery sat on the kitchen counter, 32 candles neatly arranged but still unlit. I smoothed down my blue dress, the one Mom had given me before she passed away, and checked my phone again. No calls from Dad or my siblings yet, but it was still early. The knock on the door startled me, and for a brief moment, joy bubbled up inside me. Maybe they were surprising me this year. I hurried to open it, a genuine smile spreading across my face for the first time in weeks. There stood my father, Robert Mitchell, his tall frame filling the doorway, but lacking the warm smile I'd been hoping for. Instead, his face was a mask of business-like indifference, the same expression he'd worn at corporate meetings for as long as I could remember. "Sarah," he said with a nod, not even acknowledging the festive decorations or the special day. "I need to talk to you about something important." The familiar knot of disappointment formed in my stomach as I stepped aside to let him in. He didn't even take off his coat, a clear sign he wasn't planning to stay long. I noticed he was clutching a white envelope in his hand, gripping it so tightly his knuckles had turned white. "Would you like some coffee, Dad? Or cake? I just picked it up this morning," I offered, desperately trying to inject some birthday warmth into his unexpected visit. He shook his head, placing the envelope on my kitchen counter, right next to the birthday cake with its unlit candles. "This is a formal notice," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You have 30 days to vacate this apartment." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at him, certain I had misheard. "What? Dad, what are you talking about? This is my apartment." He cleared his throat, looking everywhere but at me. "Actually, it's still part of the family property. Holdings. Vanessa and I have decided we need it for Mark. He's moving back home next month." Vanessa, of course. My father's girlfriend of 2 years, who had somehow managed to insert herself into every family decision since she arrived. "On my birthday? You're evicting me on my birthday?" My voice cracked as I fought back tears. He finally met my eyes, but there was no remorse there, just cold determination. "The timing is unfortunate, but business is business, Sarah. You have a good job now. You can find another place." I stood there, balloon strings tangled around my fingers, wearing the dress my dead mother had given me, being evicted by my own father on my birthday. The surreal nature of the moment wasn't lost on me. As he turned to leave without so much as a happy birthday, a strange calm settled over me. Little did my father know that 6 months ago, when his business was failing, and he was about to lose our family home, I had quietly stepped in. The mortgage that he thought he'd refinance through a helpful bank manager was actually transferred into my name. I had been making the payments ever since, saving the house he was now so cavalierly using as a bargaining chip. The house that contained every memory of my mother. The house I legally owned. As the door closed behind him, I looked down at the eviction notice, then back at my birthday cake. "Well," I whispered to the empty room, "this certainly isn't how I expected to blow out my candles this year." What started as tears of hurt slowly transformed into something else entirely. Sometimes the best birthday gifts are the ones you never expected. And as I carefully folded the eviction notice and placed it in my purse, I realized I had been handed the perfect opportunity to finally stand up for myself. To understand why my father's betrayal cut so deep, you need to understand where we came from. The Mitchell family home was a modest 2-story colonial in a respectable neighborhood, nothing fancy but filled with memories. I grew up watching my mother, Elizabeth, turn that house into a home with her careful touches, the garden she meticulously maintained, the kitchen where she taught me to bake, the living room where we gathered for game nights every Friday. When she was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer, I was 16, Mark was 11, and Amy was just 8. The following 8 months transformed our family forever. I still remember the day Mom called me into her bedroom, her once vibrant face gaunt and pale against the pillows. "Sarah," she whispered, taking my hand in hers, "I need you to promise me something." I nodded, fighting back tears as I squeezed her frail fingers. "Look after them all. Your father doesn't know how to show his feelings, but he'll need you. And the little ones, they'll need their big sister." I promised her without hesitation, not fully understanding the weight of the commitment I was making. After she passed, Dad retreated into his work, leaving early and returning late. He wasn't cruel or abusive, just absent, both physically and emotionally. So at 16, while my friends were worrying about prom dates and college applications, I was figuring out how to help Mark with his math homework, braid Amy's hair for school, prepare dinners, and keep the household running. My own college. Plans got postponed indefinitely. Dad's accounting firm was struggling without Mom's administrative support, and our finances were tight. Just for a year, Dad had said when I suggested taking classes at the local community college while working part-time. Just until I get the business back on track. That year turned into 3, then 5. I worked as a receptionist at Dad's firm during the day and waited tables at night, funneling most of my earnings back into the household. The first real betrayal came when I was 21. I had been saving diligently, tucking away tips and bonuses for my long-delayed education. The college fund my parents had started for me had remained untouched since Mom's death, and I planned to finally use it. But when I went to access the account, I discovered it was empty. Dad had withdrawn it all 6 months earlier. When confronted, he looked genuinely surprised at my distress. I needed capital to expand the firm, he explained. I thought you understood that your job there was your future now. I didn't argue. Instead, I swallowed my disappointment and started saving again from scratch. Meanwhile, I became even more determined to make sure Mark and Amy wouldn't face the same setbacks. I helped Mark with college applications and drove Amy to dance recitals. I maintained Mom's garden and kept her recipes alive. I dated occasionally, but most relationships fizzled quickly. Few men my age understood why family obligations always came first. Through it all, I told myself that Dad appreciated my sacrifices, even if he rarely acknowledged them. Despite everything, I eventually earned my accounting degree through night classes, working full-time throughout. The day I received my diploma, Dad attended the ceremony but left early for a client meeting. Mark and Amy cheered loudly enough to make up for his absence, and I convinced myself that was enough. Looking back now, I can see I was desperately trying to hold on to the family Mom had left behind, even as it was slowly slipping through my fingers. That house represented everything: Mom's memory, my sacrifices, our history. It never occurred to me that one day I would need to fight for my place within its walls. But as I sat in my soon-to-be former apartment the day after my disastrous birthday, surrounded by deflating balloons and untouched cake, I realized I had been slowly evicted from the family for years. This latest notice was just making it official. With my accounting degree finally in hand, my career took an unexpected upward trajectory. Henderson Financial, a mid-sized firm specializing in investment management, hired me initially for an entry-level position. But after I identified a significant tax-saving opportunity during my first month, they fast-tracked my advancement. By my 30th birthday, I was managing my own portfolio of clients and making more money than I ever thought possible. Financial literacy became my superpower, understanding the complex language of money that had always intimidated my father. This knowledge gap between us created an unspoken tension. Each Sunday dinner at the family home became an exercise in restraint, as Dad would incorrectly explain financial concepts to Mark and Amy. The stock market is nothing but gambling, he'd declare with authority, while I silently calculated the compound interest growth of my diversified portfolio. The second betrayal came when Amy was preparing for graduate school. She needed a co-signer for her student loans, and I had immediately offered, knowing my credit score and income would secure her an excellent rate. 3 days before the signing, Amy called me confused. Dad says he's taking care of my loans. He told me you offered, but that I should go with him since he has more experience. I was stunned. Not only had my father taken credit for solving a problem I had already addressed, but he'd undermined my capability in Amy's eyes. When confronted, he brushed it off. I was just trying to help. You're always so busy with work. His dismissal stung, but I let it go for family harmony. Family gatherings grew increasingly uncomfortable after that. Where I once felt essential, I now felt peripheral. At holiday meals, I'd find myself assigned to the far end of the table, away from the main conversations. Photos were taken when I was in the kitchen. Plans were finalized before I was consulted. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. Then Vanessa entered the picture. At 45, She was closer to Dad's age than mine, with sleek blonde hair always styled perfectly and a wardrobe that screamed aspiration rather than achievement. She worked in commercial real estate and met Dad while helping him scout locations for a satellite office that never materialized. From our first meeting, I sensed her wariness toward me. Behind her practiced smile, her eyes assessed me like competition rather than potential family. Her attitude toward Mark and Amy was different. Warm, indulgent, almost motherly, despite being barely 13 years older than me. The third betrayal blindsided me completely. I discovered through Amy's Instagram that the entire family, Dad, Vanessa, Mark, and Amy, had taken a week-long vacation to Florida. I hadn't been invited or even informed. When they returned, sunburned and full of inside jokes, Dad seemed genuinely surprised by my hurt. "We didn't think you could get away from work," he explained weakly. "And it was last minute. Vanessa found a deal we couldn't pass up." The exclusion hurt more than I could express, but still, I persisted in trying to maintain our family bonds. Then came the financial troubles at Dad's firm. Over dinner one evening, he mentioned casually that business had been a bit slow lately. My financial instincts went on alert. After some gentle probing, the truth emerged. Dad's firm was hemorrhaging clients to younger, more tech-savvy competitors. The mortgage on our family home, which had been refinanced multiple times to fund business expenses, was 3 months behind. "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" I asked, genuinely baffled. "I could have helped with the business model, looked at the books." His expression hardened. "I don't need my daughter telling me how to run the business I built before she was born." Pride. It always came down to pride. Despite his resistance, I offered to help with the mortgage payments. "Just until you get back on your feet," I insisted. "I'm doing well now, and it's the least I can do after everything." Reluctantly, he accepted, though I could see it pained him. What he didn't know was that I had looked into the mortgage situation on my own and discovered it was far worse than he'd admitted. The bank was weeks away from foreclosure proceedings. As I drove home that night, I couldn't shake the image of strangers living in our family home, of Mom's garden being torn out, of all those memories being erased. That was when I first got the idea that would eventually lead to my current situation. The idea that would change everything 6 months later when my father handed me an eviction notice on my 32nd birthday. The call from Granite National Bank came on a Tuesday afternoon as I was finalizing a client's retirement portfolio. "Ms. Mitchell, this is Brenda Hayes from the mortgage department. I'm calling about the Mitchell property on Oak Street. We've been trying to reach Robert Mitchell regarding the delinquent payments, but our calls haven't been returned." My stomach dropped. Despite my offer to help with payments, Dad had apparently continued to ignore the problem. "I'm his daughter," I explained. "I'm aware of the situation. How bad is it?" The news was worse than I'd feared. The house was not 3 months behind as Dad had claimed, but 7. Foreclosure proceedings would begin in less than 2 weeks. After a sleepless night weighing my options, I called the bank back and asked about possible solutions. "Well," Brenda said hesitantly, "given your father's current financial situation and credit score, refinancing with him as the primary holder isn't an option." She paused. "However, if someone with stronger financial credentials were to take over the mortgage?" The suggestion hung in the air. I knew what she was implying, and I knew it was probably the only way to save our family home. "What would that process look like?" I asked, my voice steady despite my racing heart. The next 2 weeks were a blur of paperwork, credit checks, and secret meetings with bank officials. I never told Dad what I was doing. Instead, I created a story about helping him negotiate with the bank for better terms. In reality, I was transferring the mortgage entirely into my name, using my savings for the down payment to bring the loan current, and committing myself to monthly payments that, while manageable with my salary, would significantly impact my own financial goals. The loan officer seemed puzzled when I insisted that my father shouldn't be informed about the true nature of the arrangement. "Usually families are transparent about these matters," he noted with raised eyebrows. I smiled tightly. "My father is very proud. This arrangement allows him to save face while I help behind the scenes." What I didn't say was that I feared if Dad knew I owned the house, his pride would never allow him to accept the help. Instead, I created a fictional story about a special bank program for struggling business owners that had forgiven some of the debt and restructured the payments. Dad accepted this explanation with suspicious ease, perhaps because he wanted to believe it. The financial sacrifice was substantial. I had been saving for my own home, planning to move out of the small apartment Dad had allowed me to use rent-free, a fact he never failed to mention when he needed something from me. Now, those savings were gone, and my monthly budget was stretched, thin by mortgage payments on a house I didn't even live in. But it was worth it to preserve our family home, Mom's memory, and Dad's dignity. Or so I thought. The fourth betrayal came just 2 months after I'd secretly taken over the mortgage. I drove over one Sunday to find a construction crew tearing out the kitchen where Mom had taught me to cook, where her handwritten measurements were still penciled on the inside of a cabinet door. "What's happening?" I asked, trying to keep the panic from my voice as I watched strangers dismantling our history. Dad beamed proudly. "Vanessa found an amazing contractor. We're modernizing the whole first floor. Wait until you see the plans." No one had consulted me. No one had even warned me. Vanessa emerged from the backyard, sunglasses perched on her head. "Sarah, what a surprise. Don't worry, we saved your mother's old china cabinet. Everything else was so dated, though." I stood amid the destruction of my childhood memories, knowing that I was paying for this renovation I hadn't approved, watching my mother's touches being erased room by room. That evening, I called a family lawyer friend for advice. "Let me get this straight," Jordan said after I explained the situation. "You own the mortgage, but your name isn't on the deed?" I confirmed this was the case. "Technically, your father owns the property, but you own the debt secured by it. If he defaults on payments to you, you could foreclose, but otherwise, he can legally do whatever he wants with the property." The information left me feeling hollow. In my rush to save the house, I had left myself vulnerable. The call with Jordan prompted me to dig deeper into Dad's finances, something I should have done before taking over the mortgage. What I discovered shocked me. The business wasn't just struggling, it was failing. Dad had been using personal credit cards to pay business expenses for over a year. More disturbing was evidence that Vanessa, with her real estate connections, had been pushing him to consider selling the family home. According to emails I shouldn't have had access to but did through our shared family accountant, they had already discussed listing prices with realtors. They were planning to sell the house I was now paying for, without telling me. Meanwhile, Vanessa's influence continued to grow. She had moved into the family home 6 months ago, bringing her minimalist, aesthetic and ruthless efficiency. Family photos were relocated to closets and drawers. Mom's garden was replaced with low-maintenance landscaping. Traditional Sunday dinners became catered affairs when they happened at all. As my birthday approached, I found myself hoping that the day might bring some reconnection. Perhaps turning 32 would somehow reset our family dynamic. I planned a small celebration at my apartment, sending invitations to Dad, Vanessa, Mark, and Amy 3 weeks in advance. I requested an afternoon off work, bought a new dress, and ordered a cake from Mom's favorite bakery. I even pulled out Mom's old recipe box and made her famous punch, the one that had been present at every Mitchell celebration for as long as I could remember. As I arranged streamers and balloons the morning of my birthday, I allowed myself to hope. Maybe today would be different. Maybe today I would feel like I belonged in my own family again. I was so focused on that hope that I never imagined what was actually coming. Not just another disappointment, but a complete betrayal that would force me to make the hardest decision of my life. My 32nd birthday dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect spring day that Mom would have called a gift from above. I woke early, excited despite years of conditioning that should have taught me to expect disappointment when it came to family celebrations. This year would be different, I told myself as I showered and applied makeup with extra care. The dress I chose had been my mother's favorite on me, a simple blue A-line that brought out the color in my eyes. "You look just like I did at your age," she'd told me once when I wore it. Those words had always felt like the highest compliment. By 9, my apartment was transformed with streamers and balloons in shades of blue and silver. The cake waited in its box on the counter, 32 candles carefully arranged but not yet lit. Mom's punch recipe had come out perfectly, the floating rings of pineapple and cherries bringing back memories of birthdays long past. my phone pinged with birthday messages from colleagues and friends. Taylor, my best friend since college, called early. "Happy birthday, beautiful. Are you ready for dinner tonight? I've got reservations at that new place on Main you've been wanting to try." I confirmed our plans while scanning my call log for any missed calls from Dad, Mark, or Amy. Nothing yet, but it was still morning. Mark had classes until noon, and Amy was probably busy with her internship. Dad wasn't an early caller on the best of days. By noon, I'd received flowers from my team at work and a singing telegram arranged by my assistant. The card attached read, "Couldn't let the day pass without some embarrassment. Happy birthday from all of us who appreciate you every day." The sentiment warmed me, but I still found myself checking my phone every few minutes. At 2 o'clock, just as I was considering calling Dad myself, there was a knock at the door. My heart leapt. Maybe they were surprising me after all. I smoothed my dress and hurried to answer, a genuine smile spreading across my face for the first time in weeks. There stood my father, looking oddly formal in a business suit despite it being Saturday. No gift in his hands, no warm smile, just a stiff nod and a white envelope clutched tightly enough to crease the paper. "Sarah," he said, not even acknowledging the decorations or the special day. "I need to discuss something important with you." The familiar knot of disappointment formed in my stomach as I stepped aside to let him in. He didn't even take off his coat, a clear sign this wasn't a social visit. He barely glanced at the festive decorations, his eyes skimming over the birthday setup without acknowledgement. "Would you like some punch, Dad? Or cake?" "I made Mom's recipe," I offered, desperately trying to inject some birthday warmth into this increasingly uncomfortable encounter. He shook his head, placing the envelope on my kitchen counter, right next to my untouched birthday cake. "This is a formal notice," he said, his voice businesslike and cool. "You have 30 days to vacate this apartment." I stared at him, certain I had misheard. "What?" "Dad, what are you talking about? This is my apartment." He cleared his throat, looking everywhere but at me. "Actually, it's still part of the family property holdings. Vanessa and I have decided we need it for Mark. He's moving back after graduation next month." I felt like I'd been slapped. "On my birthday? You're evicting me on my birthday?" My voice cracked slightly as I fought to maintain composure. He finally met my eyes. But there was no remorse there, just cold determination. "The timing is unfortunate, but business is business, Sarah. You have a good job now. You can find another place." As if the eviction notice wasn't shocking enough, he continued with what felt like a rehearsed speech. "Also, I wanted to let you know personally before you hear it elsewhere. We've decided to sell the house." The room seemed to tilt. Sell the house, our family home, without even discussing it with me? My voice had risen despite my best efforts to stay calm. Dad's expression hardened. "Vanessa has an opportunity to open her own real estate office. We need the capital. The market's hot right now, and the old place is worth considerably more than I paid for it." The casual way he referred to our family home, the old place, felt like another slap. That old place contained every memory I had of my mother. It held the marks on the wall tracking our growth, the garden she had lovingly tended, the rooms where I had essentially raised Mark and Amy after she died. And it was the house I had secretly saved and was still paying for. But what about Mom? What about all our memories there? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Dad's expression softened fractionally, the first hint of humanity he'd shown since arriving. "Sarah, your mother has been gone for 16 years. Life moves on. We can't keep a house out of sentiment." His momentary softness vanished as he checked his watch. "I have another appointment. The details are all in the letter." 30 days, Sarah. I'm sure with your financial acumen, finding a new place won't be difficult." As he turned to leave without so much as a happy birthday, I was seized by a sudden doubt that had plagued me for years. "Dad," I called after him, my voice barely above a whisper. "Did I do something wrong? Something to make you Not care about me the way you care about Mark and Amy? He paused at the door, his back still to me. For a moment, I thought he might turn around, might finally address the distance that had grown between us. But he simply adjusted his coat and said, "Don't be dramatic, Sarah. This isn't personal. It's just practical." And then he was gone, leaving me standing alone in an apartment decorated for a celebration that would never happen, holding an eviction notice instead of a birthday card. I sank down onto my couch, still in my mother's favorite dress, surrounded by cheerful decorations that now seemed to mock me. The tears came slowly at first, then in heaving sobs that left me gasping for breath. Not just for the eviction or the plan to sell our home, but for years of feeling invisible in my own family, for sacrifices unacknowledged and loyalty unrewarded. As the tears subsided, I found myself moving to my home office on autopilot. In the bottom drawer of my desk, locked away from casual discovery, was a folder containing all the documentation of my secret arrangement with the bank, the mortgage transfer, the payment records, the legal ownership that Dad knew nothing about. As I spread the papers across my desk, a strange calm began to replace the hurt. For years, I had allowed my father to dictate the terms of our relationship. I had accepted scraps of attention and convinced myself it was a feast. I had compromised and sacrificed, always putting family first, even when family increasingly didn't include me. But as I looked at the mortgage documents bearing my name, I realized I finally held the power to change our dynamic. Dad and Vanessa couldn't sell a house that was legally bound to a mortgage in my name. They couldn't dismiss me anymore. For once, they would have to acknowledge my existence and my importance. The question was, after a lifetime of putting everyone else first, did I have the courage to finally stand up for myself? I spent the remainder of my birthday in a state of emotional turbulence. Anger, hurt, vindication, and guilt crashed through me in waves. I canceled dinner with Taylor, unable to face even my closest friend while I was so raw. Instead, I sat on my living room floor surrounded by deflating balloons, sipping wine directly from the bottle, and staring at the mortgage documents spread before me. The power I suddenly realized I held was intoxicating after years of powerlessness. I could stop the sale of our family home with a single phone call. I could force my father to acknowledge my existence, my contributions, my place in the family. I could even, if I wanted to push it that far, evict him and Vanessa from the house I was paying for. The vengeful scenarios played out in my mind. Dad and Vanessa scrambling to find housing with the same 30-day notice they'd given me. The shock on their faces when they realized I'd been the one keeping the roof over their heads all these months. The public embarrassment for Vanessa when her real estate colleagues learned she hadn't even known who held the mortgage on her own home. Around midnight, my phone rang. It was Taylor, concerned when I'd ghosted our dinner plans. "Sarah? Are you okay? I've been worried sick." Her familiar voice broke through my revenge fantasies, bringing me back to reality. I poured out the whole story. The eviction notice, the plan to sell our family home, the secret mortgage arrangement, and my newfound power. Taylor listened without interrupting, a skill I'd always appreciated in her. When I finished, expecting encouragement for my revenge plans, she was quiet for a long moment. "Sarah," she finally said, her voice gentle but firm, "you have every right to be hurt and angry. What your dad did was cruel, especially the timing. But before you do anything, take a breath. Make sure whatever you do next comes from a place of self-respect, not just anger." Her words gave me pause. Was I planning to assert my rights, or was I simply plotting revenge? "What would you do?" I asked her. "I'm not you," she replied, "and I don't have your history with your family, but I know you, Sarah. Despite everything, you still love them. Make sure whatever you do next is something you can live with afterward." After we hung up, I forced myself to step back from the emotional precipice. Taylor was right. I needed to approach this strategically, not just reactively. The next morning, with a clearer head, I began researching my legal rights as the mortgage holder. I learned that while I didn't own the house outright, my position gave me significant leverage. Dad couldn't sell the house without satisfying the mortgage, which would require either paying it off entirely or getting me to agree to a transfer to the new owners. I had the power to block any sale that didn't meet my approval. Armed with this knowledge, I decided to consult with a real estate attorney to understand all my options. The consultation confirmed what I'd already discovered and added some interesting possibilities I hadn't considered. You could potentially purchase the property yourself, the attorney suggested. Since you already hold the mortgage, you'd essentially be converting your loan interest into equity ownership. The idea held appeal. I could preserve our family, home, and its memories without depending on Dad's goodwill. As I was processing these options, another betrayal blindsided me. While checking some financial news, I decided to look at local real estate listings out of curiosity. There, already online, was our family home, listed for sale at an ambitious price with Vanessa herself as the agent. The description made no mention of the property's true financial situation, instead emphasizing its potential for development and desirable location. They hadn't even waited for me to find new housing before listing the property I was paying for. The listing included photos taken recently without my knowledge, photos showing the renovations that had erased so much of Mom's touch from the home. Seeing our family home advertised like any other commodity solidified my resolve. This wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore. It was about principles and justice. I spent the next week developing a comprehensive plan. I would attend the upcoming family dinner that Sunday, an obligation I usually dreaded but now anticipated with newfound purpose. I would listen and observe, giving them the opportunity to be honest about their plans. Only if they continued their pattern of dismissal and deception would I reveal what I knew and the power I held. I prepared meticulously for all possible scenarios. I organized my documentation chronologically, made copies, and placed everything in a professional portfolio. I rehearsed what I would say, practicing a tone that was firm but not emotional, authoritative but not vindictive. I even consulted with my therapist, a relationship I'd begun a year ago to deal with my family issues but had never disclosed to my father or siblings. Remember that your goal isn't to hurt them back, Dr. Winters cautioned during our emergency session. Your goal is to establish healthy boundaries and require respect. The difference is crucial for your own healing. By the time Sunday arrived, I had transformed from the devastated birthday girl to a woman with a clear purpose. I dressed carefully in a sleek black pantsuit that I normally reserved for important client meetings. Professional, powerful, but not threatening. I styled my hair in a simple updo, applied minimal makeup, and wore my mother's small pearl earrings as a private reminder of why this mattered so much. As I drove to the family home, I felt a strange sense of calm. For years, I had approached family gatherings with a mixture of hope and dread, always eager for connection, but braced for disappointment. This time was different. This time, I wasn't coming as the perpetual people-pleaser hoping for scraps of affection. I was coming as Sarah Mitchell, financial professional, mortgage holder, and woman who had finally found her voice. Whatever happened, tonight our family dynamic would never be the same. And for the first time in years, that thought didn't fill me with fear, but with a tentative sense of freedom. The Sunday family dinner that would change everything began like dozens before it. I arrived exactly on time, neither early enough to seem eager nor late enough to seem disrespectful. The house looked different each time I visited. Another plant of Mom's replaced, another wall painted in Vanessa's preferred neutral tones, another piece of family history tucked away in favor of modern, impersonal decor. I rang the doorbell instead of using my key, a small acknowledgement that I no longer felt this was truly my home. Amy answered, her expression flickering with guilt when she saw me. "Sarah, you came. I wasn't sure you would after..." She trailed off, unable to directly reference the eviction notice delivered on my birthday just days ago. "Of course I came," I replied with a calm smile. "We need to discuss the transition, right?" My portfolio was tucked under my arm, innocuous enough that no one would question it. Inside, the smell of catered Italian food filled the air. Vanessa didn't cook. Another break from tradition in a house where Mom's home-cooked meals had once been the centerpiece of family gatherings. Dad and Vanessa were in the living room, glasses of wine already in hand. Mark was setting the table, looking uncomfortable when he spotted me. "Sarah?" Dad acknowledged with a nod, not bothering to stand. "Glad you could make it. We have a lot to discuss." Vanessa's smile didn't reach her eyes. Drink? I opened a lovely Cabernet. I declined politely. I needed absolute clarity tonight. Dinner proceeded with excruciating small talk. The elephant in the room, my impending eviction and their plans to sell our family home, remained unaddressed as we discussed the weather, Mark's final exams, and Amy's internship. Finally, as the catered tiramisu was being distributed, Dad cleared his throat. So, Sarah, have you started looking at apartments yet? I have some colleagues who might know of vacancies in good areas. The casual way he referenced upending my life made something harden inside me. Actually, I replied, keeping my voice conversational, I wanted to discuss the broader plan first. I understand you're planning to sell the house? Dad and Vanessa exchanged a quick glance. Yes, Vanessa answered before Dad could speak. We've already had significant interest. It's a seller's market right now. Her tone was smug, almost triumphant. I noticed, I said mildly. I saw the listing online, very comprehensive, though I was surprised to see it listed before anyone discussed it with me. Dad frowned. Sarah, while I appreciate your attachment to the house, this is a financial decision. The money from the sale will fund Vanessa's new business and provide a nest egg for all our futures. The way he said our futures made it clear he wasn't including me in that calculation. I nodded thoughtfully. And the timeline? When are you hoping to close? We already have a showing scheduled for next weekend, Vanessa interjected eagerly. If all goes well, we could be looking at closing within 45 days. Dad added, which is why we need you to vacate the apartment promptly. Mark will need somewhere to stay when he returns, and the new owners may want a quick possession date for the main house. I see, I said, taking a sip of water. And may I ask what arrangements you've made regarding the mortgage? The question hung in the air. Dad looked momentarily confused. The mortgage will be paid off from the proceeds of the sale, of course. Interesting, I murmured. And have you confirmed the current status of the mortgage? The payoff amount? Any prepayment penalties? Dad's confusion deepened. The real estate agent handles those details. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. Those are just formalities, Sarah. I have everything under control. It was time. I reached for my portfolio and removed the mortgage documentation, placing it neatly on the table beside my dessert plate. Actually, I think there might be some important details you've overlooked. I slid the papers toward my father. 6 months ago, when the bank was about to foreclose on this house because the mortgage was 7 months behind, not the 3 you told me about, I took action to save our family home. Dad's face paled as he stared at the documents. What are you talking about? The bank restructured our loan. They created a special program for business owners. I shook my head slowly. There was no special program, Dad. That was the story I created so you wouldn't feel like you needed my help. In reality, I transferred the mortgage into my name. I used my savings to bring the loan current. I've been making the payments ever since. The silence that followed was absolute. Vanessa snatched the papers from Dad's limp hands, her eyes widening as she scanned them. This can't be legal, she finally sputtered. I would have known. My contacts at the bank would have told me. Your contacts may not have had access to the information, I explained calmly. The arrangement was handled confidentially at my request to protect Dad's dignity. I turned to my father, whose face had gone from pale to gray. I never intended to use this as leverage. I genuinely wanted to help preserve our family home, Mom's memory, everything this place represents. But you've made it clear that those things don't matter to you anymore. Mark and Amy were staring at me with expressions that mingled shock, confusion, and something that looked almost like respect. So what does this mean? Mark finally asked. It means, I said, maintaining my professional tone, that this house cannot be sold without my approval. As the mortgage holder, I have a legal interest in the property that must be satisfied before any transfer of ownership can occur. Vanessa's composure cracked entirely. You sneaky little... You've been planning this all along, haven't you? Waiting for the perfect moment to undermine everything. I met her gaze steadily. No, Vanessa. I've been waiting for my family to remember that I'm part of it. I've been waiting to be included in major decisions, to be treated with basic respect. to not be handed an eviction notice on my birthday without a second thought. I gathered my documents and stood. I'll leave you all to discuss this new information. But you should know, I won't approve any sale of this house without fair consideration of its emotional value to our family, and I certainly won't be vacating my apartment in 30 days. As I walked toward the door, Dad finally found his voice. Sarah, wait, we need to discuss this reasonably. I paused, turning back with a small, sad smile. That's all I've ever wanted, Dad. When you're ready for a reasonable discussion where I'm treated as an equal member of this family, you know where to find me. As I stepped outside into the cool evening air, I felt lighter than I had in years. Whatever happened next would be challenging, possibly messy, but for the first time since Mom died, I wasn't just reacting to my family's demands and disappointments. I was standing up for my worth, my contributions, and my right to be respected. The drive home was strangely peaceful. I had done what I needed to do. The ball was now in their court. The fallout from my revelation was swift and chaotic. I had barely reached my apartment when my phone began ringing. First Amy, then Mark, then repeated calls from Dad that I let go to voicemail. I needed space to process what had just happened, to stand firm in my decision before being pulled back into the family vortex. Dad's voicemails progressed from commanding, "Call me immediately, we need to fix this misunderstanding," to threatening, "If you think you can hold this family hostage with your financial games, you're making a serious mistake," to finally, around midnight, something approaching desperate. "Sarah, please. We need to talk about this like adults." I listened to each message but waited until the following morning to respond, sending a simple text. "I'm available to meet at my apartment this evening at 7. Please come prepared for a productive discussion." The response was immediate. "We'll be there." The "we" didn't escape my notice. A family meeting had been called, and I was finally at the center rather than the periphery. I spent the day preparing, both practically and emotionally. I cleared my schedule at work, explaining to my understanding boss that I had a family emergency. I organized additional documentation that might be needed and called my real estate attorney for a quick refresher on my rights and responsibilities. Most importantly, I mentally rehearsed staying calm and focused regardless of what tactics my family might employ. At precisely 7, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find not just Dad, but Vanessa, Mark, and Amy crowded in the hallway. Their expressions ranged from my father's barely contained anger to Amy's obvious distress. "Please come in," I said, stepping aside. My small living room had been arranged for this meeting, with enough seating for everyone and a coffee table, cleared for documents. As they filed in, I noticed Vanessa carrying a leather portfolio similar to mine from the previous night, battle preparations, apparently. Once everyone was seated, an uncomfortable silence fell. I waited, letting them make the first move. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "Sarah, I think you owe us an explanation for your deception." The accusation might have triggered my people-pleasing instincts in the past, sending me into defensive justifications. Instead, I met his gaze calmly. "I don't see it as deception, Dad. I saw a problem. Our family home was about to be foreclosed upon, and I solved it discreetly to protect your pride. The only reason it's coming to light now is because you're trying to sell a house that I've been paying for without even consulting me." Dad's face flushed. "The house is in my name. The deed has been in my name since before you were born. Whatever arrangement you made with the bank doesn't change ownership." My attorney had prepared me for this argument. "You're right that the deed is in your name," I acknowledged, "but the mortgage is in mine. Legally, that means you can't sell the property without satisfying the mortgage first, which would require either paying it off entirely or getting my approval to transfer it to new owners." Vanessa jumped in, her voice sharp. "This is manipulative and possibly fraudulent. You took advantage of your father during a vulnerable financial time." I raised an eyebrow. "Fraudulent? Every document was legally executed with full disclosure to the bank. The only deception was the story about a special bank program, which I created to spare Dad's feelings." I turned back to my father. "Would you have accepted my help if I'd been honest about taking over the mortgage?" His silence was answer enough. Mark, who had been quiet until now, leaned forward. "Sarah, I get why you did it. But why spring this on us now when Dad and Vanessa have already made plans based on selling the house? It was a fair question, asked without accusation. I never intended to spring anything on anyone, I explained. I was content to keep quietly making the payments, keeping our family home safe. What changed was learning, on my birthday, no less, that I was being evicted from my apartment, and that the house I've been paying for was being sold without anyone even mentioning it to me. Amy winced at this, looking down at her hands. When you put it that way, she murmured. Vanessa wasn't backing down. This is emotional blackmail. You're using financial leverage to force your way into decisions that aren't yours to make. I met her hostile gaze directly. And you've been using emotional leverage to gradually push me out of my own family for 2 years. Which is worse? The room fell silent. Dad broke it with a different approach, his voice suddenly conciliatory. Sarah, honey, I understand you. Feel left out sometimes. But this business venture is important to Vanessa, to our future together. Surely we can come to some arrangement that satisfies everyone. The sudden shift to tenderness might have swayed me once, but I recognize the tactic now. I'm open to arrangements that respect my position, both financial and familial, I replied evenly. What exactly are you proposing? Dad glanced at Vanessa, who opened her portfolio and extracted a document. We've prepared an offer, she said. All business now. We'll repay your mortgage contributions to date plus 10% interest in exchange for your agreement to transfer the mortgage to the new buyers. I accepted the document and scanned it quickly. The numbers were far below what would be fair compensation, not just for the payments I'd made, but for saving the house from foreclosure in the first place. This isn't adequate, I said simply, setting it aside. And it doesn't address the fundamental issue. I'm not being treated as a full member of this family whose input matters. Frustration flashed across Dad's face. What do you want, Sarah? To stop the sale completely? To punish us? What's your end game here? It was the question I'd been waiting for, the one that would allow me to lay out my terms clearly. I want 3 things, I said calmly. First, I want acknowledgement of my contributions to this family over the years, financial and otherwise. Second, I want to be included in major family decisions going forward, treated as an equal rather than an afterthought. And third, I want a fair financial arrangement regarding the house that recognizes my investment in preserving it. The demands hung in the air. Mark was the first to respond. That seems reasonable to me, he said quietly. Sarah has always been there for us, Dad. For all of us. His support caught me by surprise, a warm counterpoint to the tension. Vanessa's expression had turned calculating. What exactly would a fair financial arrangement look like to you? Before I could answer, Dad interrupted, his patience finally snapping. This is ridiculous. You think because you went behind my back with some banking trick you can dictate terms to me, in my own house? He stood abruptly. I won't be manipulated by my own daughter. Come on, Vanessa. We're leaving. Vanessa hesitated, clearly reluctant to abandon negotiations that might save her business plans. Robert, maybe we should hear her out. Now, Vanessa, he insisted, already moving toward the door. She gathered her documents with obvious reluctance and followed him. At the door, Dad turned back. This isn't over, Sarah. If you think you can hold our family hostage this way, you're sadly mistaken. After they left, an awkward silence fell. Mark and Amy remained seated, looking uncertain. You guys can go too, I said softly. I know this puts you in a difficult position. Mark shook his head. Actually, I'd like to stay and talk if that's okay. There's a lot I didn't know about what you've done for us over the years. Amy nodded in agreement. Me too. I feel like I've been missing something important. For the next 2 hours, we had the most honest conversation we'd had in years. I explained the sacrifices I'd made after Mom died, not to make them feel guilty, but to help them understand why the family home meant so much to me. They shared their perspectives on how Dad and Vanessa's relationship had changed the family dynamic. By the time they left, something had shifted between us. A new understanding, perhaps even the beginning of a true adult-sibling relationship based on mutual respect rather than old family patterns. As I closed the door behind them, I felt both drained and strangely invigorated. The confrontation had been painful but necessary. The family structure that had been dysfunctional for so long was finally being forced to change. Whether that change would ultimately heal us or break us apart remained to be seen, but at least now we were dealing with reality instead of pretense. And for the first time in years, I wasn't facing it alone. The following week passed in an uneasy stalemate. Dad stopped calling after his dramatic exit from my apartment, apparently committed to freezing me out until I capitulated. Vanessa, however, was more practical. She called twice with revised offers, each slightly better than the last but still not acknowledging the emotional components of my demands. I maintained my position calmly but firmly. Meanwhile, my relationship with Mark and Amy blossomed in unexpected ways. We met for coffee without our father's knowledge, sharing stories and rebuilding connections that had been strained by years of family dysfunction. Mark revealed that he had never intended to move into my apartment. Dad and Vanessa had made that plan without consulting him. I already signed a lease with roommates near campus for my graduate studies, he confessed. When I told Dad, he was furious, said the plans had already been made and I was being ungrateful. Another manipulation exposed. 10 days after our confrontation, I took decisive action. Working with my attorney, I prepared a formal notice to my father as the property owner, stating that as the mortgage holder, I was requiring an inspection of the property to ensure its condition was being maintained in accordance with the terms of the mortgage. The letter also included a reminder that the family had 60 days, not the 30 they had given me, to vacate if they still intended to sell the property. The certified letter was delivered on a Tuesday. By Tuesday evening, my father was at my door, his face a storm of emotion. 60 days? An inspection? What game are you playing, Sarah? I invited him in calmly. It's not a game, Dad. It's business. Isn't that what you told me when you delivered my eviction notice? Business is business? He paced my small living room like a caged animal. This is different. This is our home. Yes, I agreed quietly. It is our home, not just your home, not Vanessa's cash cow. Our family home. The home Mom loved. The home where I helped raise Mark and Amy after she died. The home I saved from foreclosure when you couldn't make the payments. My words stopped his pacing. For perhaps the first time, he really looked at me. Not as his dutiful daughter, but as a woman standing her ground. What do you want from me, Sarah? He asked, his voice suddenly tired. I want you to understand what you've been doing to me for years, I replied honestly. Sidelining me. Taking my contributions for granted. Making major decisions that affect me without even consulting me. And I want it to stop. He sank onto my couch, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. I never meant to hurt you, he said, and for once I believed he was being sincere. After your mother died, you were so capable, so strong. You just handled everything. I guess I started to think you didn't need anything from me. The admission cracked something open between us. I did need you, Dad. I still do. Not to solve my problems or manage my life, but to see me. To value me as much as you value Mark and Amy. To include me in the family you're so busy building with Vanessa. He was quiet for a long moment. The house really means that much to you? I nodded. It's the last place Mom was happy. It's where she taught me to bake and garden. It's where she made me promise to look after everyone. Every time Vanessa removes another trace of her, it feels like losing her all over again. Understanding dawned slowly in his eyes. I didn't realize. We talked for hours that night, having the first real conversation we'd had since Mom died. It wasn't perfect. Years of patterns couldn't be undone in one evening, but it was a start. By the time he left, we had the outline of a compromise. The house wouldn't be sold immediately. Instead, we would take 6 months to consider alternatives, including the possibility of me buying out his share of the equity. More importantly, I would be included in all family discussions about the property going forward. The next person to cave was Vanessa. With the house sale delayed, her business plans were in jeopardy. She arrived at my office unannounced one afternoon, all conciliatory smiles and calculated charm. Sarah, I think we got off on the wrong foot. she began after settling into the chair across from my desk. "I never meant to come between you and your father." Her insincerity was transparent, but I remained professional. "What can I do for you today, Vanessa?" She cut to the chase. "I need capital for my business. The house sale was supposed to provide that. Since you've blocked that path, I'm wondering if you might be interested in becoming an investor instead. The proposal might have been laughable if it weren't so predictable." "I'm afraid that won't be possible," I replied. "My financial commitments are already allocated elsewhere." Her friendly facade cracked slightly. "This vendetta against me isn't helping anyone, Sarah. Your father and I are building a future together. Don't you want him to be happy?" It was the wrong approach. "My father's happiness has been my concern since I was 16 years old," I said evenly, "which is why I saved the house he nearly lost. I'm not against his happiness. I'm against being treated as disposable by my own family." Vanessa left in a huff, but the encounter confirmed what I had suspected. Her attachment to my father was contingent on his financial usefulness. That suspicion was confirmed 3 weeks later when Mark called with news. "Sarah, you won't believe this. Vanessa moved out last night, packed her things, and left while Dad was at a client dinner." The news shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. "Did she say why?" "Dad said they had a huge fight about money. Apparently, she's been approached by another real estate developer, some guy she used to date. When Dad couldn't guarantee funds for her business, she jumped ship." While I didn't feel any joy in my father's pain, the development confirmed the wisdom of standing my ground. As the 60-day mark approached, another shift occurred. Dad called to ask if we could meet at the family home to discuss options. When I arrived, I found him alone, sitting at the kitchen table with boxes of old family photos spread out before him. "I found these in the attic," he explained. "Your mother was always the one who organized the photos. After she died, I just couldn't look at them anymore." We spent the afternoon going through memories, and by evening we had reached a new understanding. Dad would move into a smaller place, one better suited to his current needs. I would take over the family home, buying out his equity over time. The official transition took place exactly 60 days after I had delivered my notice. I stood in the driveway watching as Dad loaded the last of his essential belongings into his car. The rest would be moved gradually as he settled into his new condominium. "You know," he said, closing the trunk, "your mother would be proud of you. Not just for saving the house, but for standing up for yourself. She always said you had her backbone." The words meant more to me than he could know. "I'll take good care of it," I promised. "And you're always welcome here, Dad. This will always be your home, too." As he drove away, I turned to face the house, my house now. The place where my journey had begun and where, in an unexpected way, it was beginning again. The path forward wouldn't be easy. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But for the first time in years, I felt like we were moving in the right direction, not just as individuals, but as a family. 1 year after the birthday that changed everything, I stood in the kitchen of the family home, my home now, putting the finishing touches on a cake. Not just any cake, but Mom's special recipe, the one she'd made for every family celebration when I was growing up. The house around me had undergone a transformation, but unlike Vanessa's cold modernization, my changes had been made with reverence for the past while still embracing the future. Mom's garden had been restored and expanded, blooming with her favorite flowers alongside new varieties I'd chosen. Her kitchen remained largely untouched, though I'd upgraded the appliances. Throughout the house, I'd found a balance between preserving memories and creating new ones. The mortgage was fully in my name now, with a legal agreement establishing my ownership of the property. Dad had moved into a condominium closer to his office, a change that seemed to reinvigorate him. Professionally, without Vanessa's influence pushing him toward retirement and her real estate ambitions, he'd refocused on his accounting practice, even bringing in a younger partner to eventually take over. Our relationship remained a work in progress. Some weeks were better than others. Old patterns occasionally resurfaced, requiring patient correction, but the baseline had fundamentally changed. He consulted me about important decisions. He acknowledged my contributions. Most importantly, he saw me, not just as his capable daughter who would handle everything, but as a person with my own needs and feelings. The sound of the doorbell pulled me from my thoughts. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and went to answer. It's smiling at the sight of Taylor standing on the porch with a bottle of champagne. "Happy rebirth day," she exclaimed, hugging me tightly before stepping inside. I'd decided to reclaim my birthday this year, transforming it from a day of painful memories into a celebration of new beginnings. Taylor had enthusiastically supported the idea, helping me plan what we were calling my rebirth party. "The place looks amazing," she said, looking around appreciatively. "Every time I visit, you've made another improvement." "Small steps," I agreed, "just like everything else this year." More guests arrived, colleagues from work, friends I'd reconnected with, and neighbors I'd gotten to know since taking ownership of the house. Mark came with his girlfriend, both of them carrying gifts despite my no presents request. Amy arrived shortly after, having driven in from her new job in a neighboring city. The most surprising arrival came an hour into the party. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find Dad standing somewhat awkwardly on the porch, holding a small package wrapped in blue paper, the color Mom had always used for my birthday gifts. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said hesitantly. "You're not intruding at all," I assured him, stepping aside to let him in. "I'm glad you came." He handed me the package. "It's not much, but it made me think of you." Inside was a framed photo I'd never seen before. Mom and me in the garden, both of us laughing as we planted tulip bulbs. I must have been about 10 years old. "Where did you find this?" I asked, touching the image gently. "In one of your mother's old albums. I've been going through them lately, trying to, I don't know, reconnect with memories I pushed away for too long." The simple admission represented such growth for him that I felt my eyes filling with tears. "Thank you, Dad. It's perfect." The party continued around us, warm and lively. When it came time to cut the cake, I found myself surrounded by people who truly saw and valued me. As I blew out the 33 candles, I made a silent wish not for anything I needed, but in gratitude for what I'd already gained. The strength to stand up for myself, the wisdom to know my own worth, and the courage to reshape relationships that had been damaged by years of imbalance. Later that evening, after the guests had gone and I was cleaning up the last of the party debris, I found myself alone in the kitchen, looking out at Mom's garden in the moonlight. The journey of the past year had been painful at times, but ultimately, healing. I'd learned that family isn't defined by blood or property, but by mutual respect and love. I'd discovered that being a good daughter didn't mean sacrificing my own needs, and that true strength sometimes means drawing boundaries with those we love most. Most importantly, I'd realized that the promise I made to my mother all those years ago, to take care of the family, included taking care of myself too. Standing in the quiet kitchen where Mom had once taught me to bake, I felt her presence more strongly than I had in years. "I kept my promise, Mom," I whispered to the empty room. "Just not in the way I thought I would." The house creaked gently. In response, a familiar sound that had frightened me as a child until Mom explained that old houses talk to us in their own language. "They're just telling their stories," she'd said. This house had many stories, some painful, some joyful, all part of what made it home. And now, after nearly losing it and then fighting to reclaim it, I was finally writing my own chapters within its walls. Not as the family caretaker who was taken for granted, but as a woman who had learned the hard way that sometimes you have to fight for your place in the world, even when that fight is with the people who should have been protecting your place, all along. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who took advantage of your generosity, or found yourself needing to draw firm boundaries with loved ones who couldn't see your worth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Like this video if you've ever had to make the difficult choice between keeping the peace and standing up for yourself. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about finding strength in difficult situations. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the hardest battles we fight are the ones that finally set us free.